everybody. My name is Naya and I'm the Black female engineer. I provide content for new and aspiring software engineers, and today we are building a website with HTML and CSS. So let's get right to it.
So this is going to be the end result of all our hard work. Just a very simple, very clean landing page. This could be for anything, for your business, for your personal brand, etc. So we're going to start off by defining the doc type, the document type, and that's HTML in the language English. So that's just the abbreviation EN. And we're going to add some items in the head. First, the meta char set, but really character set, which is UTF-8. My bad. Then we are going to link our CSS. And so the relation to the HTML is that it's a style sheet, and the href is the style.css. That is what I named the CSS file. If you named your CSS file kangaroo, it would be kangaroo.css. Next, we're going to define the title of the page, which is landing page, and we're going to do a quick smoke test. This is just to make sure everything's linked correctly. So we're going to change the body background color in CSS to purple, and boom, there it is. And so we know everything is linked correctly. Now I'm going to just fix the spacing up a tiny bit. I like to have last space, and to move the head indentation back. And now we're getting into our body tag. Oops. There we go. So now we're going to define our first div class, and that's going to be top-banner. And we're not going to do anything with it because it's just going to hold an image for us. And so we're going to define our next div class, and that's going to be main-section. And in main-section, we're going to create another div called section-2. And so in section 2, we're actually going to create another div, because these are our containers. And so this next div is for the photo we want to have. And we're going to keep it simple, call it left-photo. And so that's that left photo we saw in that preview. And so it's not going to hold anything but the image. So we'll get back to that. And so the next div is going to be right-text. Literally very simple. I like to keep everything very simple here. And so in right-text, we're going to define an H1, and we're going to say, design a personal website that attracts your dream opportunities. Something, that sounds legit. And then we're going to define an H4 as our subheader, which is going to say our free resources reveals the main factors to consider when building your personal website. And then lastly, we're going to have a button, and that's going to say, get my free booklet. So we're almost done now. We're getting to the next main section, which is going to be that list we saw. And so this div class is going to be named section-3, and in that div we're going to have an H2 which says what it explains inside. It's referring to the booklet we are talking about here. And then we're going to have another div with the class name of list. And within that, we're going to create an unordered list, i.e. a list of bullets. And so we're going to do our first li tag, and we're going to say why building your personal website is the best next step for your career. The next list item we're going to say, or the next bullet point, is going to say how to create a personal website and be known in your industry for your skill sets. So that's the second bullet point, the second list item. The third, we have I think 5 in total, so the third is going to say how to create a short and long-term goals that represents your vision and what you want for the future. My bad, that A is a typo. That is my bad. I just noticed it now. Then we have the best practices for new developers looking to build their brand in the tech industry. Then the last bullet point, the last list item, is the top 5 insights brought to you by talented developers in your community to ensure success in your transition. So now I'll give you all a moment to catch up. We did a lot, so I'm going to zoom out here and let you all catch up. You can pause here. If you're all good, you can fast forward. But yeah, we're gonna sit here for a hot minute. So now outside that list div we created, but still in section 3, we're going to create a div class named photo zoomed in and then close it right away because it's going to be an image we'll grab later. And then finally, we're going to create a div class with the name main-section-button. And in this, we're going to create a button with the text, "Get my free booklet." So the same button we had before, just again to, really urge them to get this hypothetical booklet, y'all. And then we're going to create our final div of class footer, and we're just going to add a simple copyright statement with the P tag, with the class name of copyright. We're just going to say example company name, whatever that is, and then all rights reserved. So I'm going to zoom out, show you what the second portion should look like, so feel free to pause to double check you have everything.
I also added that copyright symbol next to example company here. I just Googled it and then copy and pasted it. So you can do the same thing. But yes, feel free to pause. And if we refresh, there it is. Beautiful.
So we're going to get to the good stuff of finally styling. All the links you'll need are in the description box below, including this one, which is the Myers reset. We need this to take away all the default styling that our browser implements, because as developers that can get in the way of our styling, and we then may be wondering, why is it not showing up the way I want to, etc. So we put that in there, and then I just comment end of Myers reset just to know when my code begins. And actually there's a typo. There we go. There we go. And yes, it's in the description box below. And so we're going to take this image, this first image, and we're going to use that for our first div. So we're going to define just some stuff for our body. We want the font family to be sans serif, and we want the font weight to be lighter, which basically just means it's thin text instead of more heavy text. So you see what the Myers reset did? All of that pre-styling, yep, it is all gone now. And so we're going to go into our first div here, which if you recall was called top-banner. We're going to add that image we just saw. So we're going to say background dash image, URL, parentheses, quotes, and then paste that URL in there. It's in the description box below. And so now we also want to define some other properties. The size of it, we want it to cover the entire div. We also want it to not repeat itself. If it can't cover the whole div, if it's too small, what CSS will do is create all these repeats. We don't want any repeats, just the one image, and we want it to be fixed, which you'll see the effect of that later. It creates this cool effect while scrolling. The width, we want it to be 100%, so cover the whole page. From left to right, cover the whole page. And then the height, 600px, and there it is. So now we're going to make the position absolute, and we're going to define the z index. Now, making the position absolute and defining the z index, which is basically what order we want the divs to appear, will show up when I define the next div, but basically it's going to make it so that things can overlap one another instead of just appearing one by one. So you see how everything disappeared? It's because the z index here is 1. So we're saying we want this to show up first, and since nothing else is defined, then everything else went to the background. So we'll see it in a second. And so you have to stack the z index 1, 2, 3, with the third div being the third thing to be on the screen. So you'll see what I mean in a second. But with the main dash section class, we're defining the padding dash top, the position, and z index as 2. So you see how once I defined the index as 2, it popped up? Yep, because we're saying we want this to be the second thing stacked. Padding top makes it so that the text is a little bit down in the position relative, makes it so that we'll later be able to make everything or make 2 specific divs side by side. So dot section 2 display inline block, that's for that side by side effect. Margin dash left, we want to move 15% from the left, so it's going to actually move to the right from the left. Padding dash top, we want it to be 5%, so it's going to move down 5% from top down. I hope that makes sense. So we're just, pushing that top 5%. Now we're going to style the class left-photo div. And so that's the background image. We have the URL and then the quotes inside the parentheses. And we're going to grab this image into the URL. So that link is going to go into that URL. And then we're going to do the same thing we did last time, defining the background size, saying that we wanted to cover everything. We want the width to be 350px. It's not, too big. And then the height to also be 350. So if we refresh, there's our image. And you see how it's on top of the back of the other image? Yeah, that is what we wanted. And so now we're saying float left, which is also going to contribute to that side-by-side effect you'll see of the div soon. Oops, there we go. And then we're going to define the margin dash right, which is saying, hey, push it to the left from the right, 35px. This makes it so that the two divs have space between each other, they're not touching. And we want the margin dash top to be 10%, so move down about 10%. So you see how there's that little tiny space in between that next text and the picture? Yeah, that's because of the margin dash right. And then the float left allowed it to be side by side, along with the inline and the things we had defined above. So now the dot right dash text, which is that piece of text we just saw, we want that width to be 700px. We want it to be a pretty big box. We want the height to be 485px. I'm very particular with my height. And then we want the background color to be a specific color, not just, red or teal, but RGB, that stands for red, green, blue, 248, 231, and 215. It creates this kind of tan peachy-ish color, more tan, but with a hint of peach. Now we want the color of the text to be this like bluish color, so RGB 2066 103. So yeah, this like nice subtle blue here. Then we want the padding top to be 5%, so we want the text to be moved down about 5%. And we need the float left here too, because we want them both to float next to each other. So I'll let you catch up for a second if you need to pause here. And then we need the margin dash left of 35px. So let's see what that looks like. Boom. There's our big box. And now we're going to style the text inside. So for the most part, what you'll see now from this point on is going to be things you've now seen before, things we've talked about, so it's going to be a bit less talkative and more just code along. But when there's something new, I'll definitely jump in here and explain to you what that was. Perfect example is actually right now, the line height, which we're setting to 60px, really determines how far away or how long the line is. So if I comment it out, you see how the space in between each line is closer to each other. If I put 160px, you see how there's a huge space between each line of text. Yeah, that's what the line height does. It spaces out each line of text. We're also going to redefine the font family because here specifically we want it to be something different. It's going to be -Apple-System, and then what pops up in your VS Code, you just click tab. That's all I ever do. And then the font weight is going to be 200, so a bit more than the lighter font weight we had defined in the body tag in the very first style we did. So a bit more weight, a bit thicker than lighter, but still not as thick as the default. That was the H1. Now we're doing the .right-text, so the class right-text, which we defined, H4. And so that's how you grab certain elements in CSS. If you have, a p tag or a header tag inside a class, you just add that header, add that p tag to the class name. So the class name and then p or H1, etc. We're going to redefine the font family here as well. We also want it to be the Apple system. See how that looks here. And then finally, we're going to style that button we just saw. So .right-text to the class name and then button. So here we're going to define the border color because the default is black, and so we don't want to see a black border with a blue background. Then we're going to define the border radius, which makes it so that the edges are a bit more curved instead of this cut, right angle. And then just define the font here and see what that looks like in a moment. We're also going to define the border width, which is that, line around the button to 1px so that it's a thin line rather than this thick border. Then we're going to just make the letter spacing 2px, which just makes the letters a bit further apart from one another. So now I'm going to give you all a moment to catch up. I'm going to zoom out and start from that end of Myers reset. So here's that first half we did, and then I'll move on to the second half.
So now we're going to style the button some more, specifically on the hover, what we want the button to do when we hover over it. So we want to change the background color to white and the text color to that blue. So basically invert those colors. And so I'll show you what it's going to look like. So now, if we refresh when we hover, you see how the colors invert. We also want the cursor to be a pointer, to be a pointer when we hover it to indicate that, hey, this is clickable. And then finally, we're going to change the transition. So you see how quickly it turns into that new color? So we want it to be a more slow, smooth transition. So if I refresh, now you see that it's slower? Yeah, because we set the transition to 0.4 seconds. So we're saying finish the transition from the previous color to this color in 0.4 seconds. The bigger that number is, so you can say 1 second, 2 seconds, the slower the transition is. So I'll demonstrate that here. So if I say 1.4 seconds, we refresh, you see how much slower that is? So yeah, it's a fun little styling feature. But yeah, let's bring it back to 0.4 and we're good. On to section 3, same old, same old. And now we're styling that bulleted list we have. I actually liked the styling for this. You'll see just some little things we do that some of you may not have seen before. So now we're going to say that we want the list style type to be none. And so this just gets rid of the default styling for bullet points. But then we'll add those bullet points back. So now styling each list item we want the list style type to be a circle. You'll see it's a different circle than a typical bullet point. And then we also want the padding left to be 1.5 EM. EM is kind of a measurement like PX, but EM is more relative to the font size of everything. So you can define things with either PX, EM, or percent. You see here I used percent a lot. I really like that. But you see how the bullets are these hollow circles? Yep, that is what we wanted. And then we also want the bullet point to be actually a different color. So we're actually grabbing the marker itself, which is that circle, and we're going to make it like a brighter orange, you know, for aesthetic. And boom, there it is. And now we're going to add our last image. Oh, actually, this isn't our last image. Our last image of person. And so I just called it photo zoomed in because it's that original picture but zoomed in and from a different angle. And so you know the drill by now with the background image and all. Oh, and actually I'm realizing I picked the wrong image for that first person image we have. So let me, yep, I picked the wrong image. So let me go up and fix that. So 1 second while I fix that. It's a very easy fix. We're just going to change the link we used, the URL we used, to be of the right image. There we go. And now we're going to take this URL and put it down in that zoomed in. There we go. And no, we can't see it yet because we haven't defined our width and height for it. And so let's do that now. Now we're styling our second button that appears in that main section. And everything should look familiar. So there, that was the button class, the div. Now we're actually grabbing the button within that div and styling that specific component. typically we leave the same styling as before, border width 1px, because we want thin lines, and you see how thin this line is? Yeah. So let's fix a few things. Let's now style that hover, and we should be good for the button. And now finally, the footer. The footer is where companies will put their copyright information, their contact information, any links they want, but ours is going to be very simple since, we have none of that. We're going to make the background image that previous image in our top banner. Then do everything like before with the background styling. So let's take a look. And there it is. So it creates this look of a natural continuation of our first image. And so I just like how that flows together. And so I really like having a fixed background. So let me show you what not having fixed looks like. You see that? So when it's fixed, we're saying we don't want the image to move when we scroll. And so it creates this cool effect on the scroll. Now you'll see that styling truly in probably all my apps, all my sites, because I just love it so much. Now we're going to do some quick styling for the P tag, which is our copyright statement. So we're defining the padding for the top, right, bottom, and left in that order. That's what defining padding the way I just did it does, so you don't have to keep saying padding top or padding right or padding bottom. And the same applies for margin. You can apply all 4 statements in one, going clockwise, and all's accounted for. And then the background color will make it a more navy blue than we've been using, a little darker. And so we're going to do this so we can see the text that we had put, that sentence or that notice of copyright. That's why we're adding a background color for the P tag. And so there it is. So we still wanted that background image, but let's also make sure we're seeing our text. So I actually want to make some edits to our landing page. first I want the list items, the very first word in each list, to actually be bold. And so we're going to do that by putting in the strong tag and putting in the word, the first word of the list. And so we're going to do that for each of the list items. And then we need to tell CSS that we want strong to represent bold. So we're going to just put strong just at the very end here and just say font weight bold. And let's space out the letters a little bit as well. So let's do letter spacing 2px. And let's see if we refresh, and there it is. The first words are bold. Now I also want to make the text just a little bit meatier. Let's add just another sentence to each bullet point. You can really add any sentence you want. This is just for stylistic purposes. And so let's see, I'll just say something like, implementing these changes will drastically change your career outlook. And I'm just going to copy that same sentence onto all of them. And then we'll see what it looks like in just a second. And so now we're going to change a couple things in CSS. First, that zoomed in image. We're going to make it so that there's a box shadow, just to make things a little bit more interesting. So we're going to say -30px so that the shadow appears on the left, 10px, and 100px, how big we want the shadow to be, and then the color of the shadow is going to be like a dark tan-ish color. So that's RGB 209, 176, 146. So if we refresh, and there it is, just to add a little bit more subtle color. I also see that the margins are not aligned together between the list and the image. So we're going to say margin dash top for that image to be 4%. So it's going to move it down 4. And there it is. That looks about right. Now we're going to decrease the space between that first and second section. So we're going to change the padding top. Oh, and actually there's already padding top defined, I forgot. So we're going to change it from 18% to 13% to just decrease that size. You see that? It's a little smaller. Just little changes can make all the difference. Also want to increase the space between that H2 and the list / image components. So that was in section 3, so the section 3 H2. And we're just going to make it so that the margin dash bottom is 5%. Refresh and boom. Just a little bit more space there. And so this is what we have now. Super simple, super just clean.
Oh, and actually, I'm realizing I actually made 2 changes off screen that I'm going to fix, that I'm going to show you here. I changed the font weight of that subheader that we saw. So I had made the font dash weight to be lighter in .right dash text h4. So the h4 in the right dash text div. I just added font dash weight lighter, and I actually did a similar thing to this second title, and I changed the font weight there as well. So in .section dash 3 h2, I made the font dash weight 200. And so not as thin as lighter, but not as thick as just the regular text we see. And so now everything should look updated.